an amazing book from his friend in Juneau, Alaska. Oh, and Elmo learned a new word from the book, too. Goodness cheese. Oh, Elmo likes that word. Goodness cheese. Oh, that means thank you in Tlingit. So, goodness cheese for being Elmo's friend. Elmo loves you.
Don't forget to watch Sesame Street on Alaska Public Media and visit sesamestreetincommunities.org for more resources for kids and families.
Yay. So third time he said it was the best. First two, maybe I'd critique it a little bit, but it was fun. It was fun. I was contacted to send some things. So I'll put like taught Elmo Tlingit like at the top of my resume now, and just be like, do you need to know anything else? But I want us to think also about just like content creation, and it can be bigger picture things. Like I think Star Wars in Navajo recently came out or is coming out on the Disney Plus channel, and so is Elmo. And so yeah, my kids saw that and they got kind of freaked out, and so it's really fun. And my kids also freaked out when there was stuff on Molly of Denali, and so like getting episodes of Molly of Denali is also possible, and putting some language in there, but we just gotta weigh like how much language is going to go into the thing, and that counts towards exposure, normalization of languages. But then there's also like just pure content creation within. And so there is a group of us that's going to start meeting soon to talk about animation and illustration and how to develop some of these tools locally, but then also to figure out how to move forward. Yeah, so Finding Nemo. Nemo is in Navajo. It's also in Hawaiian, and so then there's also sort of initiatives like that, like how do we get on board with that with our languages? Reach out to someone, get our languages put onto some big time movie. It'd be great. I'd love to be like Darth Vader. I could do that all day. Um, and and it could be someone else, but maybe I don't have the voice. I could do like C3PO or whatever. I don't know. But anyways, just sort of wanted to start off with that, and then we got quite a few presentations, so I think we should just move right into it. I gotta turn this thing off so it doesn't beep at us. But any quick thoughts before we move into our presentations? Yeah, dubbing Star Wars, I'm all for it. But and then sometimes you gotta get permission. Like I put up a video where I dubbed over like this little clip from Family Guy, and it got shut down fast. It shut down my whole YouTube account. So then you gotta sort of go through the right channels. But also Lakota, they did it with Bernstein Bears. So there's a whole series that's all in Lakota. It's amazing, right? But and it's also just sort of like um, it also becomes a question of like, do your values match up with this thing? And sometimes they don't, and you can have fun and you could just put it out there because it's a awesome thing. Like a buddy of mine shared a clip because he's Navajo, and he showed me it. Like someone was recording in a movie theater, which you shouldn't do, but they weren't recording the movie. They were recording the reaction of when the general guy, whoever speaks first in the Star Wars movie, he comes out and he says it in Navajo, and the place just goes crazy. People throwing stuff in the air. Like just seeing that kind of joy was pretty magnificent. And if we do Star Trek as well, some people are Star Trek, or there's other things too, right? And then there's also like Edge of the Knife. There's The Fast Runner. There's like full feature-length films that could be made through Asuma TV and those guys. And then other avenues. Like I'm surprised with all the technology and stuff like that Hawaiian hasn't done it yet. I seen a Maori movie it's all in Maori. And it's called Headhunters. And so like um, in addition to teaching things for or creating things for teaching the language, there's also just going to be content in the language, which is a huge need. It's a huge need. And so Hawaiian, they do have a bunch of stuff that's made in Hawaiian and for kids, but it's pretty much all inside their school. So like if you're in the school, you'll see it all the time. There's all these cool little videos they made. And yeah. Anyways, anybody got anything?
Yeah, I think we should, I mean, thinking about those comics and illustrations, like students could be doing that in every class, like any class where they're drawing art, like just whatever style their art is mixed with form line to create. And I mean, I don't know how hard it would be to use some of these old stories. Like, oh, I was reading part of Through Spanish Eyes, and there's so many different parts where like they had to have got that from a movie, like a movie come from that. Just the action, the drama that's happening, and the things that unfolded. Like that's a whole comic book, or I
Yeah,
guess a skit.
there's a lot you could do with our stories as well, where you wouldn't even need the English because you get the visual to assist with the translation. So not to say you don't put it on there. I mean, maybe don't, but maybe do. And so it's pretty exciting. I'll show you guys, maybe next week I'll show you a clip from the movie Klondike, which is a bad example. And I'll share why when we look at it. But yeah, and looking at the chat in the chat about Jabba the Hutt. When we did Macbeth and Tlingit, the only people that spoke English were Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and when they were plotting evil stuff, then so they'd speak in English. And there was like some critic in Washington D.C. who probably hated us, so he gave us like this scathing, horrible review, and I hurt a lot of our feelings. But then our director there, she was really great, and she just read a couple of reviews, and she's like, "This is just what these people do. Like, don't let it affect you." And he's also mad because it's poo-pooing on English a little bit, and he's having a racist reaction to that. So, since racism was flaring up, but yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff you could do. There's a lot of energy in some of this stuff, like translating Shakespeare into your language and adapting the story to fit. There's quite a few groups that have done that in different ways. There's creating your own content. So just sort of plant some seeds as we start to wrap up this section of presentations. And I see the last 5 are today, but if we're done with today and you haven't presented yet, then you should probably reach out to me so we can make a plan. Because everybody's supposed to present something, and you're just showing us a little lesson. And then we'll strategize on Monday about what to do for the following Wednesdays. I still want to do like presentation time, but we could do groups. We could shift the direction a little bit. If you guys want to make little films or something, we could try it out. We could also do a couple of hands-on sort of things. I could show you some things that I do, whether that's video work or audio work or creating actual content like books and stuff like that, dictionaries. So, but we should turn over to Katie. It's your turn.
Did you say me?
Yeah, you.
Okay, I thought I heard Katie, but I was like, wait, what if it wasn't? Alrighty, let me just share my screen. Right here. So I was really excited doing this. This is actually my first time, like, wait, can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, it said that you couldn't. It's my first time actually creating something that I plan on sharing. And yeah, so I was really nervous, and like nothing really exists in like Dictionary yet. Like we're finally getting materials out and like kind of learning as we go along. But I thought that this picture was kind of, oh yeah, I'm not presenting, but yeah, this picture is like of the Yukon, and like the main Deg like Hiton region is the lower Yukon. So whoa, kind of what I did. So this is gonna be something like if I were to, well, I just kind of everything's kind of just up in the air right now. I think that what I'll end up having to do is like record all of the things that I'm gonna do and kind of send it back to the tribes because of their lack of Wi-Fi. But like as I go through my slides and stuff, I'm gonna kind of have this picture, like this is gonna be one of the ones that they see. At first it was really confusing to me, but just shows what's like voiced and voiceless. And of course, I'm not going to go too deep into that at first. So I just kind of broke down all the consonants into like I started with like I put it alphabetically just to make our English brains happy. I kind of like just wrote a little bit about like, okay, this is a glottal stop, this is what it looks like, and this presentation is for like absolute beginners in the language. And so it'll kind of I tried to take like more of like an English, like this is what it's how it's found in English, like an oh, like that stop. And then I just have a couple examples that I'll just say maybe 2 or 3 times, just so they kind of get that like, okay, well, this is what a glottal stop is. And then just like the basic sounds like in chain, children, just kind of how those interact with one another. I did that for a lot of them. It was kind of hard, like I had to listen to like pre-recordings and then be like, okay, yeah, this is what it sounds like to me, and this is like how they say it. So it kind of broke it down in a way that I was actually able to like catch on to, which was nice. Yeah, so it's kind of what I did. So just going through, I tried to highlight the ones that like yeah, it was just a lot of highlighting. So yeah, basically my plan is just going through all of these and maybe having like, because like the group is really small, so just having them try it and just yeah, getting that basic how to like pronounce consonants. So I just found a lot of 2 or 3 different words, and I'm not too worried about them like memorizing or like knowing these words just yet. I'm just kind of more about like, I don't know, because like when I first started looking at these words, I was like, wow, how am I ever gonna pronounce these? And it really helped taking Tlingit, because it's like, okay, well, we're in the same language family. This is like easier for me. But yeah, so like dots, just trying to add like find those similar words and try to explain it in a way that they could be like, oh, okay, yeah, whenever I see this, this is what the word is going to sound like. And I try to go for a little bit easier words, like a little shorter, just so it's not as it doesn't seem as overwhelming, or something like that they'll be able to catch on to quickly. Yeah, I just have like my plan was to finish putting like all the consonant sounds on, and then I'm gonna go more into like vowels and stuff. And to keep it like light and stuff, I was gonna kind of split it up, just be like go over the first half and really make sure that they understand the sounds and how to make them. And I'll keep referring to that like where it's is in your mouth, and be like, oh yeah, like have them try to say like one of the words, like maybe like dots, and then be like, okay, well, where did you feel like you were making the sound? And yeah, that's basically like what I did. These look a little hectic, but I swear they're not. But yeah, like I try to make it as laid back and as like, how do I say this, like comforting as possible, like oh yeah, I can completely do this, this is going to be great type thing. And then yeah, so this is kind of what I have just for that first like introduction lesson. And of course I'm going to be like doing a lot more talking in the actual presentation, but as far as my content, this is what I have. And I'm definitely going to be adding the vowel sounds in there and like the rest of the consonants, and yeah, just get the all the sounds in practice down so we could start getting into cool stuff.
Yay.
Gitte Dogden.
Oh, say it one more time.
Gitte Dogden.
Gitte Dogden. And how do you say wooden mallet for smashing eels?
Oh yeah, that's one I actually like a lot of this stuff, like I don't actually like know yet, but then it's really interesting because I'm learning a lot about like our, let's see, where was that one? A lot about our language, our just our culture and like the kind of different things that we'd do. Where is it?
I was hanging out with some Maori people, and they were sharing some of their foods with us, and they had kind of air dried eel, and their word for eel was tuna. So then I was like, wait, you call it tuna, but it's not like tuna, like the fish, and it's very greasy, but it was yum. I smashed some of that. It was good.
Heck yeah. Yeah, so for this one it's Vaha because like our X is more of like a like an H kind of sound.
Huh?
And Gidit says Vaha Gidit says.
Think it says.
Yeah, I didn't even know that they used a wooden mallet for mashing it. I was like, I knew that we had like eels and stuff in the area.
I didn't know
And
that.
like, yeah.
Okay, who wants to start the sandwich? Sorry, I had to get into the smashing business here.
Oh, I can start. I really like that idea, especially the chart that you used in the beginning. We used that at SFU, and I thought it would be a cute idea to add like hair to the chart, to the sound chart. Like I always wanted to put red curly hair on it, just because I just think that would be fun. But I thought that was an awesome idea. So how?
Oh, that's such a good idea. I should do something like that. Just kind of customize it. I love it.
Yay. Anyone else?
Yeah,
Thoughts?
if you make a video too, you could just use your audio recording from your phone or device or something, and just have that up while you're going through. It'd be cool to hear those sounds too, because I haven't heard them.
Yeah, and if you folks haven't done it, the process, you could use PowerPoint or Keynote to develop your slides. Then you export them to images, like usually JPEG files. And then what depends on what you're using, but you could use Final Cut Pro, you could use iMovie, you could use Premiere Pro. There's a bunch of different things for making videos out there. And so basically you'll have a timeline. You just drag all your photos down to the timeline. And then what you basically do is you go through and you try to quietly click, but then also record yourself saying the sounds, right? It's a little bit intimidating because like I still got stuff. I made one years ago, and then there's a couple things. I'll probably have to make a new one so I could fix a couple things. But at least you can get people close. You give them something, give them just a starting point. But then you record, and then you could drag out how long the image. They're just a still image, but they're there on the timeline up until the next sort of thing. So if you had like da and then cheech, and so like and then one of the keys is to sort of look at, so you'll be able to look at how long the sound file is for when you say a word. Like if you said gonna cheesh, then it'll show you how long it is. So then you just add a space that's a little bit longer so that the listener has a chance to repeat it after you say it. And then you can just you can also kind of copy and paste it once you start learning how to move around in some of these movie making software, so that you can, if you just recorded it once, you could just drop it in there, move it over. So you could have it repeat 2, 3, 4 times. So good stuff, great stuff. Any other thoughts?
I just loved this because the language itself has a big influence on Lower Yukon Danaka. So like you had the words for Noya and Sada. Those are the same words we use. And it was just, I don't know, super cool for me to see that. And I like how you have it low key and comforting, because like when I talked to Elizabeth Keating about Deghinag, it's like, I feel like you really reflected the need of the community.
Dogden, yeah, like I was trying to mess around with like the audio, but I'm like, am I really like, I still get caught in like that. Am I saying it right? Am I doing it right? Like, will I teach it right? So it kind of like that just makes me really happy. Sorry. Thank you.
There was something too. I was thinking like, I know Une, you made that video, and there's some other ones, but even where you have like the side view and the different sounds, like with PowerPoint or slides, you can insert just that audio clip to whatever the sound is, so you can just click on it and hear the sound. That'd be cool in Tlingit too, so you can just click on it and hear it, and click on different parts for like the, or the, you know, where those sounds are coming from and how. Because then you wouldn't really need anything. You can just send a file and open it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of options. So like, I just want to stress it. Oops, I think I sent that directly to someone. Hold on. Everyone. So I'm going to put a couple things in the chat, and at some point there'll be like a kind of a website dedicated to what we're trying to do in this class and sort of larger language revitalization efforts. But a couple things, like people pay me to make stuff for Tlingit, and I write into the contracts that I usually sign that say anybody can use this stuff. And I take an approach where like, so if you look, I shared, if you go back in the chat, there's a thing that says like sound head. I don't know what to call it, but I've got an illustration, and it's basically this head that's kind of, you just sort of see it, and then you can have color coding and the fancy names for what they call these things. I want to just do a new one, so it's like behind the teeth, pizza burning zone, snoring place, you know, but whatever, you can call it whatever you want. But if you go through, there's another link I put on there, which is the Tlingit curriculum folder that I keep. And if it's stuff like, especially there's a thing called like language illustrations, and then in there there's one like Khone pictures and Khone illustrations. Like you can use any of that stuff. You don't have to ask. You don't have to credit me. You don't have to pay for it. You just use it. It's for making language stuff. You could take anything I ever make and you could do whatever you want with it. I have been accused of plagiarism for making stuff based on what other people did in the language. And I think that's a garbage concept. I think that's a colonial concept. It's like I made this and now you can't do anything with it. I do artwork, and if you did that with my artwork, I'd probably come after you. But for the language stuff, I'm like, why do we all have to try and start from scratch? What if we just had a whole bunch of things? And so, and not to say you have to use my ideas, but like if we're gonna, I really want to have a sense of collaboration and a sense of collective ownership of a bunch of stuff, which includes the future of all of our languages. And so why should one, you know, if we have some expertise in some areas, let's just share that expertise collaboratively, especially to the point where if we can get to a spot where it's like we can come up with ideas and we hand the idea off to someone who knows how to do illustration, and then they're like, okay, is it like this? And then they sort of help come up with the concept, and we hand that over to the audio video person who records the audio of whoever's speaking, and then kind of collaborate and put it all together. So that's the dream, is that there's one big place where all this stuff happens, and there's no, it's a collective ownership, because who owns the language? Like the ancestors and the future generations, and we're just here as caretakers. And I think we got to adhere to that role and stay away from these individual concepts of this is mine and you can't do anything with it. You know, and that's not to say, there's some lines like if you take somebody's work and you don't say anything about it, you sort of claim that it's your work. That's a little bit of a weird area. But if we can move away from some of this other stuff, like you can't use this because I made it, or boy, you should have said that I did that. You know, like let's just keep making stuff. But then if we have stuff we need to talk about in terms of ownership, then let's come back to it. And I say, not everybody agrees, but I say go for it, because if you find someone who can say it correctly, or if you find there's some error, then just make a new one and replace the old one. But it's better to have something out there than nothing. And it's better to just keep going, because I think there will always be internal criticism, and there will also be people who are criticizing you, sometimes because they're trying to improve what's there, but sometimes just because it's dysfunction and people are kind of mean about stuff, and people have pain, and there's all kinds of weird stuff that comes about. But I'd say, I'm not the authority, but you know, I'd say go for, if you ask me, I'd say go. You know, don't just keep tinkering on the car. You got to turn the key and just put it in drive, see what happens. Any other thoughts? Okay, I thought it was fabulous. I think it's great. It seems like a really much needed resource. As far as getting stuff to communities without strong Wi-Fi, that is a difficult situation. My recommendation is to build up a system, a network, so that basically there's a set of, you buy like 6 hard drives and you label them 1 through 6, and you just cycle them around. So if someone's making content, then they'll say, like, let's say you had 3 communities. If you had 3 communities, then you need at least 6 hard drives, and you got to really keep close tabs on these things, and someone's going to be really organized. But let's say you make a bunch of content, you put it on hard drive number 1, send it to your first community. Put it on hard drive number 3, send it to your second community. Put it on hard drive number 5, and you send it to your third community. And then they dump the stuff off of there. And then if they have stuff to send to you, they could put it on there, send it back. And if you have stuff, then you put it on. But hard drive 1 and 2 are for the first community. And there's one always in one location, just in case something happens to it. But then you can just send it over. And then whoever has good Wi-Fi, then you also have some sort of cloud system. Maybe everybody's sharing a Google Drive or a Dropbox folder. And then you keep everything in there. Just if you don't want to be in a situation where if one person's computer crashes, nobody has it, or if one person gets pissed off and quits and says, you know, everybody, I hate you, and doesn't share anything anymore, then you don't lose everything. Because those things, I've seen them both happen, and it's tragic. There's whole recordings of elders that we just don't have anymore because somebody, we didn't have a good data plan, or we trusted somebody and then they just took off. So, okay, anything else? Great work, Katie, and just let us know how we can help out too, because you know, we're working in our languages, but we care about all languages, and I know that some languages have a very small pocket of folks working, and I'm happy to help however we can.
Awesome, gonna teach.
Okay, next is Lyanna.
Hi, my grandma's having technical issues with the slides reading so she's gonna try to go on and off. Could I go first?
You bet.
Okay, great. Okay, she's trying to get that set up there. Sorry about that. So for mine, I thought let me do the share screen thing. One moment. Let's see, our application. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So let's see if I can figure this out. Share. Okay. So for my oh no, I closed it out.
It's okay.
You know, someone else can go first. I'm gonna help my grandma get it all set up, and then we'll go after since we're limited on time. I'm sorry about that.
We'll jump to Nawea. No worries, no worries. Don't sweat it.
Okay, I'll share this. Oh, maybe I have here, just a sec. So basically,
I mean, I don't really have a ton, I feel like, but I want to share that. How do I make it share the desktop that it's on? It's not sharing that, but I can share, I guess.
The top left too should say desktop. The top left.
It says desktop. I'll just move the things to the desktop that it's showing. I can share real quick. I'm sorry.
Are you just surrounded by monitors?
Well, it's just like, you know, I have the multiple desktop things on my Mac, so there's like I don't know. Okay, here we go. There we go. Now it's letting me do it. There. Okay, so something that I've been thinking about a lot is like, how do we talk about, I mean, that I really want to think about and that I think about all the time is like, how do we teach, you know, like day one, what is the math lesson at the immersion school? And I like have no idea. So there's that. And honestly, there's like a lot of language that needs to be, you know, like built or recreated, because like, you know, my opinion is like that, you know, we did have like mathematical thinking and like ways of talking about it. It's just like you know, it's been 100 years plus, probably longer, since anyone did any sort of like thinking about like, how do we teach someone to weave a basket in Tlingit? Or, you know, how do we like teach someone to weave nachane in Tlingit? Which are like, to me, sort of areas where like mathematics naturally shows up in like culture, in our cultures. And so, you know, this one right here is this is like an instructional thing for like how to weave a basket. Like the bottom, starting the bottom of the basket. This was made by Mary Lou King, and it's really well done. And obviously, like these are all just like pieces that would need to come together in some other thing. And I don't know what it looks like, but you know, Dolores has told me before that the little kids would weave the basket bottoms, and so you know, I also like don't have a good like conception of like what's reasonable at what age. And like what age did they start weaving those basket bottoms at? But that is like a place where there's like lots of math to be explored in like weaving the bottom of the basket, right? Because you're like, you start here with a certain number of warp, and then you go through this process and secure them all. And then after you go around, you start splitting them and you're like creating more warp. Does that make sense? Like, and so then you're like, what is, you know, the number we have right now plus one more warp, and then plus another warp, and then, you know, and so, and then the other thing that I've been thinking about, so I was like, I don't even know how you like teach math in English, right? So, like, what do they do for kids? And so I was like, I should probably look at like a scope and sequence for like math teachers. Like, what do they do for kindergartners? And so here they talk a lot about recognizing patterns, extending and creating patterns, sorting objects by like commonality. And so a lot of it to me is like about this like relating like the abstract thing with the concrete thing. And like, how is it that like we use the abstract things to quantify the concrete things? And then, you know, there's all kinds of patterns in basketry that you could talk about, like, you know, if we extend this pattern, what does it look like, right? How, if we repeat the pattern over and over, what does it do? You know, that sort of stuff. You know, for me, ideally, like if I were to be the math teacher at an immersion school, I would want to be able to take these kids as far as possible in mathematics, as far as they desired, right? Which often in high school is like up to like Calc 2, what we call Calc 2. And so there's like all kinds of things. Oh, all kinds of things that need to be created for that. I still think that you can use a basket as sort of like a continuing like a thing that would appear over and over, because you can ask, more and more complex questions about the basket and the number of warp as the basket grows, right? Like you can, you know, like what happens if we imagine that we can create an infinitely large basket bottom, how fast does the number of warp grow, right? And it's actually probably, it's exponential if you continue splitting each one. But anyway, yeah. So that's what I've been thinking about. And I, you know, I think that this would be nice because it would transition well between, you know, the three languages we have here, because we all wove baskets and we all wove nachain, oh, and I don't know what y'all call chilcat blankets, but yeah. So I guess.
What's it called in Smelgich? Anybody know? Chilcat blanket in Tsimshian, anybody know?
No, I know it, but I'm blanking right now.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah,
That's all.
Sorry. Great. Who wants to start our sandwich? Or just contribute any thoughts?
I love it. I love that you did it about weaving, because you're such a talented weaver, and bringing your passion into your language curriculum. Again, it's just so cool. And like, I want to hear more about the abstract concepts, defining the concrete ones. I'm just like excited to see this stuff in the language. And yeah, Gunesh Chish for sharing is awesome.
I want to piggyback off of what Anna was saying, how I love how you included this in your lesson, because I love weaving, and I know that I too know that you're a talented weaver. I wanted to ask though, I might have missed it, but what was the target audience for this lesson you just presented?
Oh, sure. It's like if we had an immersion setting where we're like trying to teach kids mathematics from the very beginning, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add, like, as we keep thinking about making stuff, you could take two viewpoints. Like, one viewpoint would be, gee, there's nothing there. We gotta start and make everything. But then I guess the positive viewpoint could be, hey, there's nothing there. We can make everything, right? So, but one of the challenges that I find is like, where do you even start? Because sometimes just trying to think of like, okay, we're gonna teach math through Shinget, and you're like, well, how do you teach math? You know, and so like, and even like basket weaving and stuff. So like, and as we make stuff, we can envision like filling things in, like this for a 7th grade like full language medium class, and they already know the language, and we're just going to talk about geography, and you know, and you can envision that stuff. And I think it's good practice to think about how to do those things. And then as you teach adults, you're going to be teaching adults how to do those things. But then sometimes I think about, like, I have language students who really love to translate poetry. And I think I usually discourage them from doing that until they're in about year 3, because I'm like, you know, well, we're kind of doing like baby books right now, you know, and so, and I know it can be sometimes disheartening to pull all the way back to the beginning, but then sometimes we do got to think about that, because like when we were first starting the Tlingit language nest and our teacher couldn't make it, something came up, and they're like, okay, Rene, you're gonna have to teach the kids today. So I was like, all right. So I pull out my computer and pull a projector screen down, and Mariah, she said, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm going to teach these kids about the classifier so they know some grammar. And they're like 3 years old, you know? And so she was saying, what? No. And so then we had to adjust. And so, like, I don't know how to teach kids. But then I've got kids, then I had to figure out a bunch of stuff. And then I also watched them. We homeschooled them for a long time, and now they're in school. And it seems like, you know, you start with counting, and then you go into 10, and then sometimes higher, then you're doing skip counting. So skip counting too also leads to a lot of pattern building. So, you know, basically I'd have a a thing that would go, there's 10 little slots and you just go by tens and you have numbers that go all the way up to 100. And so I would just work with my daughter when she was like 5 and 6, and we just count to 100 every day in Tlingit. And then we'd go by tens, and then I would change the colors. So you had certain colors which could do patterns. So they would count by twos, would count by threes, would count by fours. And so we would do that, and then I would see, could she remember how to count, how to skip count, basically. And I think there's some stuff with pattern building, and then there's a lot that they do with pattern recognition. So they'll have something that goes like eagle, raven, bear, eagle, raven, bear, eagle, raven. What comes next? You know, and so they'll do some things like that where they're putting in, or it could be shapes. But so I think there's a lot of stuff that you could do, but it might start with sort of like weave these two pieces of paper together, you know, or you know, really starting small, but then building up to that bigger thing. But I love it because it's ethnomathematics, it's real world stuff. But then also, if we're going to get them, you know, one of the challenges, nobody, everybody, so many indigenous languages just got left out of the development of mathematics and the development of modern sciences and a whole bunch of things. So now we've got to sort of figure out how to talk about that stuff in our languages and how to push our languages into those conversations. But then when we get into the higher abstract concepts, I think it could be really fun. Any other
I had a question about the basic math stuff in Tlingit. Is there different counting systems? Because we have different counting systems in Semagic for different things. So the language associated with that might be a little different depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, great question. And so in Tlingit, it's not as complicated as in Smelgach. So we count, there's generally counting things, there's counting people, there's counting by occurrences, so like 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. And then there's counting by sets. So you can go sets of 1, pairs, sets of 3, sets of 4. And that's about it. You know, and so, but other than that, you do have, it's a base 5 system, but then it turns into a base 10. It used to always be a base 20. So to say 84, you would say 4 20s and 4. That's how you would say it. And 20 is like one person because you know you got 10 fingers, 10 toes. I don't know if people can count on their toes. That'd be really hard, I think. But now it's a base 10. It's shifted to a base 10 system. And then if you get anything above 100, it just uses Klingish version. So you say 100 and 1,000, you know. And so those are other sort of things. It's like figuring those things out. Great question. And also, how do you say multiply and divide and add and subtract? And so some of those things you might have to manufacture, which is totally fine. Other thoughts, questions? So I would probably reach out maybe to Joshua Jackson perhaps because he teaches kindergarten, and I think it would benefit him to have that information in his class, and then you can really start at this foundational level. And so that might be what it takes is if you're going to become the math person for the language, is you're going to have to find teachers that you partner with so that you can see how they're teaching. And because it's always a resource question, right? It's just and so I think at one point in Hawaii, they said, okay, you're going to go become the linguist, you're going to go become the teacher of teachers, you're going to go become the administrator. And they sort of divided up these tasks. And you're going to have to do that, and then everyone's going to have to follow through. And like one of my primary pieces of advice to people going forward to become language teachers is one, be productive. You got to be productive and you got to take stuff to the finish line. Even don't worry about it being perfect, but get it out there and get it used. There's lots and lots of people who just, for whatever reason, it's just hard to put stuff out there. I watched this movie on this artist Dempsey Bob, and I gotta find that movie because he just really talked about finishing some artwork. He's like, it's like my children, and I gotta just get them out the door and into the world. And so you got to get into the mindset of being a finisher, so that you've got a project, and you know, and maybe I'm being a hypocrite because I've got 3 or 4 projects I'm way behind on, but you know, get them out there so that people can use it. Also, be a good collaborator. like figure out how to receive feedback that maybe is sometimes critical of your work, and also how to provide feedback in ways that are um, elevating at the same time as trying to, elevating the individual while at the same time uh, improving the work. And then trying to get caught up in any drama, which is hard. But you're gonna have people who don't like each other. You're gonna have all kinds of stuff going on, and there's just not a critical mass of people to say, okay, well, these two people don't like each other, so we'll have to figure out how to work without them ever being in the same room. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking. Oh, I
Go
was
ahead.
thinking about like how do you build the or like how do you like figure out how to describe these mathematical concepts? And it was sort of like I think you would have to just like build it as you go. You'd be like, oh well, now we have to talk about algebra, so we're going to figure out how to do it this year, I guess.
Yeah, and so there is. I think it would be worth sort of talking to, and let's call the school in Bethel. Just say, hey, who's teaching math? Can I talk to you guys about how'd you figure it out? Find out who's teaching math in Hawaii. What I saw was they're using lots of, I watched the kindergarten class a lot in the first grade class. They're using a lot of um, the little bears that are different colors, little plastic bears, and so you can do a lot with them to count them. And I did a bunch of stuff like here's these blue bears, and there's 4 of them, and then there's like how many do you need to have them be equal? And so we're doing a lot of like sort of concepts like that, and really a lot less like stuff on paper, and just more stuff like physical, moving things around. Which one has less, which one has more, how do you make them the same, and concepts like that. But then also like talking with Nakashan, because he's also teaching math, a lot of math through Tlingit. And then, and I think both Hawaii and the Yupik school in Bethel, there was a Navajo mathematician, I don't remember his name, but I think he went to both those places and helped them develop some systems. And so again, we don't have to it's a different language, but it's a similar concept, which is how do you make sure that you're teaching math and that you're doing it in a way that matches the culture. So weaving makes a lot of sense. Fishing, there's a whole bunch of stuff you could do. Like we watched this video and they said Hawaiian it's a base 4 system, because they had these little fish and you could put one in between every finger and your thumb, and that's how they'd count how many fish they had. And so it just developed into a base 4 system. I was like, makes sense to me, and so some things might have to adjust, but then just in terms of how do you build that foundation of building mathematical minds. So awesome. Kachtin, you have a thought?
Yeah, I was thinking about like the finish line for curriculum. So I think from some of these books that I've got for like building curriculum, it's all Western way. But really, I think the finish line isn't more just getting something done. It's like, how are you going to check that the students are actually learning? Which I think is like the same way as a long time ago, because you would be, like teaching your kids or your nephews or nieces or whatever. You would be telling them all the parts of a saw when you're cutting it open, or all the parts of the fish, because at a young age they just don't know. So you're telling them this is this is that, this is that, and then you're reiterating it by telling them to cut it off, and then you didn't cut it off, and it's like the same as going back through and doing all those steps again, but like I guess in a Western way where they're gauging. In the beginning they didn't know much, in the middle they knew quite a bit, and then in the end they were able to do it on their own. So like, is that something we should look at too, is like when we finish something, like getting those assessment portions down?
So like the lesson, like for me there's a couple different things. Like, how do you know when people are ready to move on to the next thing? And do we have the next thing ready? Which is always interesting, because if you're teaching an indigenous language, odds are you're going to get to a point where there's nothing beyond that thing, and you're going to have to start making the things. And then maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, there's this whole group that has no idea what it's like to not have anything, I tried to explain this to a dean one time. I was like, you gotta get me my own printer. And she said, no, you could just do what everybody else does. It's like, no, everybody else can just buy books for their stuff. Like there's literally no books. We're making the book as we go. And so, um, but one of the things to sort of think about is the assessment portion. Like, so how do you evaluate your students, and are you grading them? Is it letter grading, or is it, like, I have a letter grade system when I teach Tlingit, but it's not tied to how fluent people are. Like, not at all. It's not tied to fluency whatsoever. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's a bad idea. But everybody's going to think differently. But then if you've got a group of kids and you're going to build a school that's K through 12, you're going to have to think about, like, what is that process of assessment? What do you do when people are learning at different rates, and you're going to have to sort of figure out some stuff, and some of that stuff includes discipline, like, yeah, just getting kids to do homework sometimes is really challenging. And then also, like, what are you trying to teach them, and how do you ensure that they're learning what you are trying to teach them? And those are big conversations that we're going to have to engage in with probably the Hawaiians and with other folks, to just say, what are you doing? How does it work? Because, you know, there'll be parent-teacher conferences in the language, all kinds of stuff, you know. And so it's, and what you can do when you got your language school, but some kid's parent or uncle or auntie or grandparent comes in and just speaks English all the time, right? Like, some of the most difficult times we've had is with people who can speak the language but won't in certain situations. And we have to keep telling them, and then pretty soon we're in trouble because we keep telling them to not use English, right? So a bunch of stuff to consider, but I would say for the purposes of our class, we're still looking at kind of small pieces, but these are the ones, like if we look at next week, you got 200 pages or so of reading. So don't, you know, it's a bit more substantial than some of the other weeks of reading. So just keep that in mind. But there's two things we're looking at, as a philosophy of education and a curriculum sort of guidebook. So we might end up with a curriculum guidebook that's like, here is how we make new stuff. But then you might have a larger curriculum guidebook, which is, here's how we evaluate our students, and here's how we move them up. Protecting our homelands in Tlingit and Smelgich. I guess ha'ani kachadudech. So I'd say it in Tlingit.
Will you type that, please?
Uh-huh.
Oh, jeez.
Okay. Great stuff. Great stuff. Yeah, there could be mathematical terms, yeah, for dugouts, and so a whole bunch of measurements and stuff. So inches, feet, like what are the equivalents for that, and what are we going to be using? And so great stuff.
And that's you know, physics and science right there. Like, you're stretching wood to bigger than it started out. Like, that's, can't get any more scientific than that, right?
We got 2 folks left for today. Do we figure out the technical issues, or what do we got to do?
I'm here.
Yay.
I have like 5 computers. And I was doing something on all of them. So I was trying to pull it all together. But I'm here. Welcome. I'd like to invite you to a Head Start program that is open for all the students that are in this class. We will be departing from the Indian Point dock, and that's where my curriculum begins. I will go ahead and share a PowerPoint for a moment. And that PowerPoint is very basic because it was like, I don't know, but you'll see. 1 second, please. There it is. I'd rather go and run a boat around the corner than to work a PowerPoint. But in any case, it's called Say Visions, and this is the Head Start program. It's an integration of science and traditional knowledge. You will board a native science vessel, like I said earlier, off the Indian Point dock. And some of the areas that we'll be covering during this 1 week program is our traditional knowledge. And there's my make pretend dock. It doesn't look like that, but that does look pretty nice. And we're going to be boarding the science vessel. This is something that comes from the Banbridge native science vessel, where they are working with the tribes in UBC area, Victoria, and they have memorandums of agreement, and they're out there, they're researching and looking at their waters and documenting historical sites, including villages underneath the sea. From the boat, we'll be going to different places. Some of them will be on small boats, but others will be on same boat, gill netter, trawler, and a fish camp. The fish camp will be run by, and this again, it's just make pretend. Sounds really nice. Robbie, I would love to have her do my fish camp. Teresa Ryan is going to do my seine boat. Teresa is from UBC. She specializes in biology and the Tsimshian language. I also have Jessica Demret, who will be doing the seine boat. She specializes in engineering. She's a boat captain. And I can't remember her culture, but I wanted to pick people who had, all our languages. So I'm still looking. And then of course I was going to do the same boat. But in any case, you'll come to our first area that we're going to is Young's Bay. And it's from there, we'll all depart from the science vessel and we'll spread out and we'll spend about 4 days on the different fishing boats. The assessment, or the way that you'll show that you've passed, is that you created some project, you made a proposal, and then you actually worked on it and you made it happen. And so mine, and that's what this outline is. I don't know if you could see it very well, but I have it memorized. I've been saying it so many times in my head. It's a curriculum that I had fashioned for 4th to 5th graders. I find them very silly and funny and raring to go, and they're willing to try anything. And so I thought this curriculum would work best for them. And it's an integration of not just filling in the blocks for the parts of an eagle, but actually looking at some scientific names and working with some of that knowledge. And so what I'm doing here is I'm combining the functions and the parts of an eagle with an eagle story. And so again, we'll be doing this at a place as we're coming back in. We're coming into Auk Bay. We're just passing what I call the Howling Rock. It's a tall rock that's in the middle of Auk Bay. It is where the story originates. In the Tlingit culture, we have many places that have both eagle and raven names. Even people have eagle and raven names. They have part of another, and that just shows the partnership. And so this is a story that originates at that rock. And but before I get there, I wanted to backstep a tiny bit. The 5th graders, as I walk into their classroom, I'm carrying 2 bins. I set it down. There are 2 boxes of knowledge. I open up one and I need to capture their attention, so I'm going to do it with a sense of humor. I'm going to have them do things to make them dress like an eagle. They're going to be putting on these great big huge goggles with the big huge radar, the circular eyes that are going on, and they're going to have that big beak attached to their face for when they're tearing the fish apart. And they're going to attach these cardboard little rings or their barrels or tubes, and they're going to attach it to their legs because the eagle has hollow leg bones. So they're going to be putting on a raincoat to show how their feathers shed the water. They're going to be putting on a down outfit underneath, and that's to show how the eagle keeps himself warm. And then they're going to be walking around with yellow slippers and stuff, but they're going to be having fun. They're just going to be laughing because they're going to look silly as heck. So now that I have their attention, I'm going to go ahead and start my story. And so I quiet, rest, and I open the other box. The other box, things come out like, and I just painted this. It's just canvas. and it's a raven's tail. And then I have a chilkat robe. And so the children, they're allowed to come up. There's 2 at a time. One's the eagle and one's the raven. And so they usually, I'm thinking they're going to be quiet because they're going to be putting on this robe. And then I have other eagle wings that I'll bring out later, but they're all looking and waiting. And if they're quiet, they can put them on. But in any case, the story begins with a young boy that was rescued off of the rock there in Auk Bay. The ravens have a story similar to this, and it's about 7 sisters. But this one here is an eagle story, and it's my father's story. And I got the story from, I was making sure I have my source handy. And so it's documented there as well. And so the young boy is stranded on the rocks, and the tide is starting to come up. And you know the tide is higher. It comes up higher now than it did before. And so the boy became very concerned, and he started to gather the rocks, and he piled them up on top of each other. And eventually he stood on top, but again, the tide was still coming up, and he started to yell and cry and holler. And eventually he knew no one was going to come, but he just continued to do that. And he heard a big, huge sound overhead, and it sounded like something flopping, and it came and it picked him up in its talons, and it took him up to this village in the sky. The village in the sky is an eagle village. And so that is where he was raised and grew up. And so to make the story a little bit shorter, because I know I had 10 minutes, but as the story goes, he is raised, and of course the young eagle that rescued him was a girl eagle. And so he grew up, and they started to admire one another, and they decided they were going to get married. Well, the father wants to give this young man a gift. And on his wall, he has many shirts of power. Each shirt has an ability to give you certain skills. And so when the young man picked out the shirt that was on the wall that he thought would be really good, which is the best one, it's the 6th one, it's the strongest one, the father-in-law, well, the future father-in-law said, no, you can't. So maybe we'll try this other one. And so when he put on that shirt and he went outside, and he found that he could fly, and he could look around, and he had his vision, his eyes were so strong, he could see for a couple of miles away. He can look down into the water, and he can even see the bottom fish, the bass, the cod, the fish that usually are on the bottom. He could see them. His eyes were so powerful. And so he went out and he gathered the fish, and he brought it back. And he was so happy, you know, he was able to bring back lots of food. Eventually, when he went out, he tried to get a porpoise, and he tried to get a seal, and he found that he couldn't do that as well because he kept on losing them. And so his future father-in-law gave him the next shirt. The next shirt gave him more power, gave him more strength and more endurance. He could fly longer. He can carry things. He can bring home 2 sea lions. And he was able to provide for his family very well. Now, when he was given that final shirt, the 6th shirt, he was told that you must always remember not to abuse your power, and to always be home before the raven caws in the morning. Just take what you need and don't go any further. The name of this shirt was called Ka'an Kashat, one that is able to lift the whole town. And so he put on that shirt, and he went out, and, you know, becoming such a big, huge eagle, bigger than all the other eagles, and he could fly and make all kinds of noise, and he was just bigger and stronger. And he decided to get some whales, and he went out and he captured a whale, and he thought he was doing so well that he went out and captured a 2nd whale. And of course, it was getting to the late morning, and the raven cawed, and he went away. And so in the integration of the story, it's a Tlingit story. It has many lessons, and it only has a few words, but all the other words, because I was nervous, is all in Tlingit. I don't know if you can see it. It's in my PowerPoint. just left it and started talking. But so it has all the animals, and my hope is that when we're out here on the Native Science Vessel, by the way, I was thinking, you know, ANSEP gives a lot of money, and National Science Foundation, NOAA, NASA, and even Amazon, you know, they have the 5-paragraph narrative that you can write. We can actually, I believe we can actually make this happen and form a partnership and go out and study biology and look at research, study archaeology, look at our historic sites, and also integrate it with our traditional knowledge, with science, biology, all the different kinds of sciences. And that's what my Head Start program is about. It integrates the language that you would need would be the after a first year Tlingit student. You would move on to conversations. You would not just be talking about seaweed. You would actually be talking about drying the seaweed. You would be talking about the different ways you can make the seaweed. For example, those would be the smaller conversations. And then after you're out there for a week, you get a certificate. And I was thinking about $4,000. You know, just get a little shot in the arm. But you know, that's what they do up in Anchorage with the students in ANSEP. When I worked there, they got $35 an hour for their science program. They did all the sciences, and they integrated with all the traditional knowledge, and they got paid pretty well. I'm thinking we could do the same thing. Goodness, cheesh.
Sheesh. Mukecha.
I did it.
All right, folks. Compliment sandwich feedback. Anybody want to start us off?
Yeah, it looks like you have everything, like every activity, all the whole thing planned out more in detail. I mean, did you say we're going Sunday to go out there?
Yeah. Well, you know, I worked on those National Geographic boats. I even have their recipes. I have how much gas they use, and I know how much money they make. Of course, it's been a couple of years, so, you know, I know the prices are different, but I know a lot of boats that are just sitting around doing nothing.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I love how detailed it all is.
Yeah, lots was there. I love the idea of like having indigenous sciences and having our own boat and going out on the water and stuff. For the purposes of like what we were doing here, it might be better to just take like a small portion of it. I love the big picture idea, but it might be sort of beyond the scope of what we're trying to do. And we have to do a bit of each, though. We have to figure out how we're going to build a program. But the idea here was just to sort of look at like the lesson, like the story. There's so much like good stuff that could come from these stories. And wherever we're at too on our language journey, it can be intimidating to sort of say, okay, make a language lesson. And, you know, we might be saying, well, I'm learning the language. I'm not going to, how am I going to teach it right now? But what we can also do though, is use stuff like this it's a model. So we could create something that's really a cultural program that's taught primarily in English. And then that gives us this framework though to go through and start. Because sometimes you're going to have to do it this way. Like if the language community isn't there yet, or if the teacher isn't there yet, or we have stuff that could be used in a wide variety, like in multiple classrooms, and then we start integrating more and more and more language into it. Whether it just starts with saying chalk for eagle and then telling the story, but then starting to put more and more, and especially as we develop as a language learner to push through. And it'd be great to put more eagle stories out there. I don't want to start any wars, but somebody was teasing me. I was only raving at a table. All these people from the eagle moiety were just teasing me. And it was getting ruthless. So I said, oh, okay, well, tell me all those great eagle stories. So I'm not saying now, but I was just defending myself. I'm not trying to cause any wars. But there are stories. There's this one, there's the Chak Kuti hit story. There's, and I think, but what it also shows is a lot of this stuff is kind of not commonly known. So we also have to make sure that what we're teaching is informing from our stories and our histories and our songs. So I love the idea. I love the framework. There's so much you could do with his book as well, integrating it into. And if you folks don't have it, I was curious, and here's a link so you can just download a PDF version of it.
There's so many recordings that you can just listen to, you know, it's just amazing. And so many stories are right on there. Like Henry Katassin, he's talking about canoes and selecting trees and just beautiful knowledge.
I was gonna say, I got that book. I got 2 copies of that book. I forget from where, but they had like boxes and boxes of them, and it all comes with a CD, which was cool. But I don't know if the download comes with like the audio portion. But oh, it's cool. They're just giving them away. I was like, shoot, I'll take 2 of them.
I like them.
Yeah.
You know, I chose the eagle because of the way that we navigate. And I don't have time to talk a lot about all that stuff, but when we navigate, there's an eagle at every 50 feet. And there's a story about why they're at every point and why they lead the way and how they know these shortcuts. And I would respect every one of those older, which are very important rules for telling and having the elders do it. But even just common knowledge about being able to just watching how the eagles communicate with one another and how they feed one another, how they care for one another. If you just sit there and watch them, you can create a whole theme on just the eagle itself. You can create a binder this thick just about behaviors and knowledge and the stories that are, you know, of course, are there documented for them.
Wonderful. Other thoughts? I know we got one more, so we might have to move to our last presentation. But yeah, it gives lots of good ideas.
4,000 a week sounds good to me. I'll get my granddaughter.
So amazing, Liana. I have so many questions, but maybe I'll email you later because I've had similar ideas and I've just run into a lot of barriers with like racism at NOAA. And I know the head of the Sea Grant person here in Alaska, and she's not very pro-Indigenous. So yeah, can you drop your email in the chat, please?
Sure, be happy to. And you know, this is my first year. In about 4 years, I'll probably, if I don't give up, I'm determined, you know. But yes, I will be happy.
Let's do it.
I like it. Virginia Marsh, I think from Petersburg, wants to help, and I just know that there must be a way. There has to be a way.
Yes.
Okay,
well, I'm related to that. There's some conversations going on at Sealaska Heritage and also at UAS to figure out how to. Institutional racism is a stone cold reality, and so we do have to build our own schools and programs, but we also have to sort of put in some energy to open the eyes of some other folks. And so I think one of the keys, I think, is moving away from terms like traditional ecological knowledge, which served its purpose at its time, and now moving towards a term like indigenous science, and sort of just say, yeah, we got science too. It's not a big deal. And then we just sort of we adhere to the David Katzig principle, which is, he said it in Tlingit. He said, science, so he said, in English, they call it science, but we just call it life. And so, but also just to sort of say, it is science. Like, look at the halibut hook. Look at everything that goes into the knowledge that's in there. So, okay.
Let me share my screen here. Oh no, did it close out again? Oh, well, here it is. Okay. Okay, can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So this is geared towards elementary students, but it could really be used for any like any age learner. So thinking about doing Tlingit language charades so you can focus on a different topic for each one, whether it's like for this one I chose to focus on animals, but you could use it for any kind of group to get students familiar with different language. And so charades, it's a really fun way to get the students to use their total physical response and have them acting out the different, in this case, animals. And so they'll, how it would work is there would be different printouts of the different animals with the Tlingit names underneath it, and we would get familiar with those, and each student would select an animal and they would create a card with the animal and the Tlingit name underneath it that we would use. We'd make copies and probably laminate them and place them all on the floor for when it's time for them to perform. And total physical response, if you're not aware of it, it's a really great way to introduce language to all ages of learning because it makes connections with your brain, with the language and the speech and the movement. And I know Marsha Hotch uses it a lot in her classrooms, even for college students, but it's a great way to link those together, and it's pretty fun, and you're not so worried about like, am I pronouncing this right or like reading this right? It just gets you present and in your body. And it also uses learning through play, which I think is so important because especially in the school district, there's that intergenerational trauma, and it's really good to be able to build connections to school that are positive. And then it also lets them use their creativity and gain their confidence, and it builds a community in the classroom. And so right here, there would be, and this is great because you could use it for both in person and in Zoom. But here's some examples of just photos of students acting out in the classroom. So here's a link found online with some native animals, or some animals with the Tlingit names. So you could show this to students, or they could pick out additional animals too, and they would create their card for the classroom and draw the picture and the Tlingit name, which will help them also be really familiar with the one. And I'm thinking, depending on the level of their comfort, I think if they acted it out and they're like, oh, that's a deer, and then because I think that's going to naturally happen rather than the Tlingit word first, but if they're older learners, they could look at the cards on the floor and be able to read off the Tlingit name. But if it's younger ages, then you can all as a class repeat the Tlingit word for whatever animal they used and then copy the motion back to them. And I just thought that was a fun way to get the language across, and it comes across as a game. And then I think it will really familiarize them with the language. And like I said, you could use it for all different kinds of things, not just animals. So that's my presentation. Let me stop sharing here.
Yay. Ashish, who would like to start our feedback?
I love charades so much, and that's what we did in beginning Tlingit, and Kagwask was our teacher, and we were ages like 20 through almost elder age, and we got so addicted to the charades, we were like demanding it from him every day. And at one point he finally had to tell us, like, you guys, we can't just play charades every day. And it was so funny, but we loved it, and we like learned the animals really good that way, and it was super fun. So yeah, I love it.
I love charades too. I think it was great. And it also reminded me that you could easily incorporate that into like kid yoga. You know, that's something that we do in like elementary school, and we use animals, you know, for poses like frog and all that stuff. And I feel like that could be incorporated into there. So goodness, Chish, good job. Yuck.
Yeah, I was in a class, and we tried that out. We were doing a lot of like Pictionary, just drawing, and we tried to change it up one time, and the kids were all high school kids, and they were like, I don't know what a deer does. I was like, a deer, I don't know, do something. They got into it though after like a couple minutes. They were like super into it, and I think we only did it once or twice, but I think younger kids are get way more into it, or adults, you know. Yeah, awesome. Jeez.
That's fun because I was wondering about high school level because I worked with middle school and the younger kiddos, and I was like, I wonder if it would be a challenge for that grade of all like that level. So that's good to know. They'll it gets them in it, but then they get into it.
We tried with like superheroes and just cartoons just to get them to like into it, and then we went back to animals that we were talking about, but it's got them into doing it anyway, so it was cool.
Yeah, I've done similar things with like animals and all this stuff, and it seems like seventh grade might be and then eighth grade they're kind of like they feel like they're too cool, but then you make them do it and they're like really into it, and they're like, oh, I wasn't that into it. So, but I've had success doing similar things up to high school. High school is definitely a little trickier, but sixth graders love it. Seventh graders are like, oh, okay, I'll do it. The eighth graders are like, whatever. And then they'll go home and play it. But it was lovely. I can't, yeah, that was awesome. Goodness, geez.
Okay. Yeah, TPR and other things are great for, especially when you're getting folks started. And as language teachers, no matter what sort of methodologies you end up employing, just remember that give them a lot of time and space before you expect them to start saying stuff on their own. And so a lot of programs will go from like, just listen, don't worry about saying it, just listen, and then you go through, and then TPR allows you to do some stuff. Like when we learned Hawaiian, they started with TPR, but it was really just day one, and then we sort of moved on from, but they were in a kind of a high speed mode trying to teach us some stuff. But then one thing I liked about Hawaiian is they made all of their, so they have a whole building, and then in their building there was a couple things I noticed. One is when you walk in, your cell phone stops working. I thought that was pretty critical. The other thing, and it's a college, and the other thing is when you go in, you're not supposed to be using English, so it's kind of you're not going to get in trouble, but there's just this culture that you use Hawaiian. And then every classroom just had, all the walls had chalkboards, like all over. And so it wasn't very long before you got up and you went to the board. And as they taught you stuff, you're supposed to draw what you were learning. And so I like that as well because it was very interactive. Like you weren't just sitting there. And it's pretty different from the way that I teach. So well, I was like, oh, that's so great. And then you can also think about how do you keep leveling up, right? And so charades, yes, it's wonderful. And then you could move on to now they've got the pictures of the animals, and then they could play the game where they put the card on their head and they can't see it, but they use phones now too, right? And you're supposed to describe what they are. And I really like it when people move from naming things to describing things, because like I want to be able to say if we're talking in our language and these two moves come out, I want you to be able to tell me which one we should shoot in the language, right? Something beyond left and right too. Like, can you describe, or can you tell me, can you make me guess what animal you're describing by saying like where it lives and what it eats and what it looks like and what it does and what we know about it? Because now we're pushing into these, and so this is where I think we can take it as we start talking about, you know, what we do with the kids and what we do with the older kids and the older, and then we should be pushing them to these deeper levels of language use as well, which is probably why, like, when I was starting to teach at junior high, I tried to get them to do like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and like we did that, we know that. I was like, oh, well, I don't know what else to do, you know. And so, but then that's where we, as like the collection of language teachers, will take it a little bit further. The website that you used with the language stuff, I would probably not recommend that one. Uh, I've gone to them a couple times just as I'm like, oh, I got to find a word in something, and it proves to be pretty unreliable. I think it's like nativelanguages.org or something. But I do like the idea of having the images. I would also say, like, I'm kind of a stickler for fonts. Like, we should all be using the same font. Like, if they put me in charge, I would have, you can only have like 3 fonts, you know, because like a bunch of stuff in a whole bunch of different fonts, I think it makes it just look kind of like everybody's just doing their own thing. And it doesn't, I think you can have a certain look that I think does help. And I'd probably say a similar thing about images. Like, if this is the image we're using for dog, let's just use the same image as often as we can. And you know, there's arguments for and against that, because then it's being maybe too controlling in some ways. But I just want the quick association of, oh yeah, that thing is Kate, that thing is, you know, and that way you're not sort of, the brain doesn't have to take a minute to see what am I looking at. It just does a lot more sort of quick recognition of it. Great stuff. Any other we only got 2 minutes left. Any other thoughts?
I wanted to add a quick little idea. We were talking about how to get older ages and maybe not wanting to do TPR. One activity that we did in some language classes that I was in before, and it was all adults, and it was more, I guess, memory, trying to see if you have it and you can remember it, was we used a balloon. So we all still had to physically get up and we would pass a balloon around, and it was basically don't let it touch the floor kind of a thing. And if you were going for the balloon and you had to bop it and keep it off the floor, you had to say a hide word. So it was kind of like a in the moment, do you remember, without looking, without seeing it? Do you know it? Do you know this word? Do you know this vocabulary? Can you recall it really quick in the moment? And it's physical, and it is so hilarious. I think any age would benefit from that. So just a little idea I had when you're talking about getting the older ones in and maybe TPR. That was a fun one that I've done in the past.
That sounds so fun. Goodness, cheese.
Awesome work, everybody. So we have a couple of folks that will slide over to next Wednesday. Let me check. Let me double check a couple of things. Okay. So let's see, what is next week? So I do think next week we have March 4th through the 7th. So yeah, that should work for next week. So I'm going to figure out what to do, because there's this international conference on language documentation and conservation, and I'm going to try and get you folks enrolled in the conference. I probably should have done it a while ago, but I'm going to scramble and see what I could do. But I'm thinking what we'll do is next week, so we'll talk about, we got the big chunk of reading, so like get yourself ready. It's a lot of reading, and then we'll talk about it on Monday. So we'll continue to talk about the Hawaiian language programs. Wednesday we'll also have presentations, but then I think I'll probably have you folks attend as many sessions as we can, as long as I can get you folks registered for the conference. And then we'll probably we'll do that in lieu of class the week after, but we'll see. We'll talk about this a little bit more on Monday and figure it out. Yes.
Could attending as many workshops as we can we count that as our practicum hours?
Yeah, that would count. I think that should count as your practicum hours.
Okay.
Because yeah, I know a lot of you are trying to get to this 100 hours or something. So yeah, and it's all virtual, but hopefully we'll be going there someday. It's a great conference. It's so fun. Then you just go there and there's Hawaiian bands and Hawaiian food. It's really, oh no the grinds. So great job everybody with your presentations today. I sure appreciate your work and hearing your thoughts and seeing what y'all are doing with your language study and teaching. We'll see you folks on Monday. How